Official now, guys.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, thank you all so much for coming to join today. This event is inspired by a program that I participated in while I was in law school called Access to Law School. It was a pipeline program designed to support folks from a variety of backgrounds on their path to becoming an attorney. The legal profession can often feel daunting or inaccessible to many of us, and programs like this hope to change that. Each of you could be a great attorney one day, and we hope to share some of the possible pathways to make that happen. So today we'll hear from Danielle Bailey, the Executive Director of the Alaska Bar Association, about opportunities for Alaskans to attend law school and pursue careers in the law. And then we'll hear from our three panelists about their respective journeys to the law. And we'll open it up to questions and then break out into smaller groups to do a smaller mentoring session.
Great. Thanks so much, Helen. As she mentioned, my name is Danielle Bailey. I want to apologize. I got a cold about a week ago. So I'm a little more froggy than I would like. Also, just at any point, if you guys have questions, feel free to interrupt. Sorry, you guys. Feel free to interrupt any one of us. We're a small group, so we want to be as responsive to you guys as possible.
Even clear that.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry, guys. This is what, when you're the executive director of the bar, you got to just spring things on. I'm not going to go too much into my pathway, but I wanted to point out one thing, which is kind of the reason I'm in Alaska. So I originally came up to Alaska because I did not want to be an attorney. It is not the first time I failed in my profession or in my pursuit of the profession, and I guarantee you it will not be the last time. I was in law school at the time. I had just finished my first year, did an internship at the DA's office in Philadelphia, was in a department that was open 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. I was hearing cases where it was told to just max charge everything. And I just didn't feel like that was the type of law I wanted to do. Was going to law school. I'd always been a good student. And so kind of thought I was going to end up working in a big firm and wanted to work the long hours, and started to realize that wasn't actually what I wanted to do. And so found out that sometimes if you come to Alaska for internships, they'll pay for your travel up here. And so I'm taking a free trip to Alaska and I'm going to take advantage of them. And then it was in that process that I kept getting pulled aside by judges telling like, hey, are you going to come up here? We need people like you. And it was kind of through that process that I realized it wasn't that I didn't want to be a lawyer. It's I didn't want to be a lawyer if I wasn't in Alaska. So just kind of wanted to set that because it's a little bit unique. Other thing I want to do, I'm going to be going through everything that I talk about other than my background, is going to be on this postcard. So I have some postcards out on the table. And it looks like it's the same on both sides, but they're a little bit different. On one side, it has a QR code that goes to our website where we have information on becoming a lawyer and getting involved in the law in Alaska. And then on the other side, it has a QR code to our employment bulletin board. And so I'm going to cover the stuff that's on this webpage. So don't feel like you have to take notes because all the information is already written down and accessible for you. So kind of going into some more general framework stuff. When people tend to think about becoming involved in the law, I think everyone thinks about becoming an attorney. But the first thing I want to tell you guys, and I probably shouldn't be doing this as the executive director of the bar because I want everyone to be attorneys, but I want to remind you guys, there are so many other ways to be involved in the law other than attorneys. And so I wanted to kind of step through those. One of those is kind of I'm going to kind of bunch them, but being a paralegal, a legal admin, an investigator, a court clerk. And I want to highlight those because sometimes the process of becoming an attorney, going to law school, is a long period of time. Time is important to you guys, and also it's a financial investment as well. So if you guys are, this is a way to figure out if you want to get that involvement in the law. But doing those jobs can also be a way to get more experience with the law and figure out, like, kind of dip your toe in and figure out if that's something you guys want to do. Another reason I point those out is that some of those positions you actually can get paid almost the same amount as someone who is a beginning attorney. They often are jobs that have health insurance tied to it, things like that. So, and I will say, I think all of us can agree, we couldn't do the work we do without paralegals, court clerks, investigators, legal admin. They are critical to the work we do. Another thing I want to highlight how many of you, and I'm actually gonna point to these people too, these are other attorneys, and to the panel. How many of you know what a community justice worker is? All right. And then are you an attorney with active
No.
inspection? No, I just want to, I'm impressed because this is, it is something that not a lot of our attorneys know. It's a program that is particularly unique to Alaska. So to be an attorney and to go into court and represent a client, most places you have to become an attorney, pass the bar, do those things. Alaska is unique because we've created this process where people can work with Alaska Legal Services to work directly in rural communities, get trained up. I have some notes on this because it's a new program. They get trained by Alaska Legal Services to provide legal assistance where it's needed most. They go through a 10-week training program, and it's at no cost to the volunteers so long as you agree to take at least one case through Alaska Legal Services. And then you're able to go into court and represent clients. Like there is no other state in the country where you can get trained up in a 10-week program and represent clients. And one thing that's very incredible about this and how new it is just in January, we at the bar approved the first 5 community justice workers in the state. They were all trained to help in domestic violence cases. So if there's people who normally wouldn't be able to get an attorney in some of these rural areas, they've been trained to help. So it's another great way that non-attorneys can kind of come in and help with that attorney court load. Again, I'm going to say this so many times, so I apologize. All the information is on this postcard or on the QR code that goes to the postcard. So that's kind of some background non-attorney ways that you can get involved. So moving forward now to attorneys and why you should get involved. The first thing is you guys, again, I said becoming an attorney is an investment, time and money. What are you to say that when you go through that, are there even going to be jobs? Things are constantly changing, things are moving. And so is it going to be worth it? So one thing I can tell you right now is I have been tracking for like the past 10 years, how many attorneys are in Alaska actively practicing in the state versus the population. And actively practicing in the state versus the population, attorneys are going down. As I mentioned, we have an employment bulletin board. I have never seen more job openings for attorneys than I have today. Every time I go and I talk with legal entities, I talk with the courts, the thing that I constantly hear from people is that we need more attorneys in Alaska. And the thing I hear even more from them is we need attorneys like you guys, people with connections to Alaska. We don't need more people like me who I grew up in Montana. I didn't really know half of when I came to Alaska to become an attorney, I had to learn about what it's like to live in Alaska and what are the needs of this community. You guys are already at an advantage compared to all those people outside. So I'll say, I think that there is a very good chance when you guys graduate law school, you're going to be coming into a market that wants you guys up here and wants to help you be good attorneys. Another thing I can let you know is that we at the Alaska Bar, we run something called the Lawyer Referral Service, where members of the public can call in and say they need an attorney. We are getting more and more calls to that service than we've had in a lot of time, and we're getting less and less attorneys signing up for the service. And so it's just another sign that the amount of attorneys we have aren't enough to cover. And I think we have some people that work for nonprofit qualified legal service providers. I can say that we need more attorneys working for those as well. So now that's my pitch on why you should join my cult of attorneys. My next thing I'm going to talk about is how you become an attorney in Alaska. Sorry, I'm going to be looking down because I have a few notes because I get off track. So the first thing in order if you want to be an attorney in Alaska is you have to attend an ABA accredited law school. And I'm going to say this again, it's an ABA accredited law school. There's going to be law schools out there that are good and will train people and like can do a lot of great things and help you in a lot of ways. But if it is your goal to become a lawyer in Alaska, you have to graduate from an ABA accredited law school. And I would just hate for any of you who that's your end goal, that you go to a law school and then you find out you need to invest more and more. And so it's just that there are some that are going to gain accreditation. Be careful with that. I know of a couple law schools who they thought they were gonna gain accreditation in 3 years, they told their 1Ls. Those people have since graduated and a whole new, like 3 years of law students have gone through and they haven't gotten accreditation. So I just want you guys, if you're gonna be doing this, to kind of make it as easy as possible. How do you know if they're ABA accredited? Well, we have it on our website. So we want to make sure you guys know about that. Along with being graduated from an ABA accredited law school, the other thing that you have to do to become a bar admitted attorney in Alaska is take a bar exam or get admitted in another jurisdiction and then transfer in. And so I kind of want to talk about that transfer in process first, just because it's easier. And so why would, if you can take a bar exam, why would you not just take it and come in? Well, some states have made it easier so you can get admitted without taking a bar exam. For instance, there's in Wisconsin, if you graduate from any Wisconsin law school, you are automatically can be admitted or eligible to take the bar. There's always a character and fitness component of the bar that we'll talk about a little bit later. In addition, more and more states are trying to find ways for people to get admitted to the bar without passing a bar exam. Some of those, Oregon is creating a pathway where instead of sitting down, taking a test, you create a packet of materials to show that you're eligible and you submit it in. Washington and New Hampshire have more internship geared ways where if you go through these programs, you then get admitted. And I also wanted to point out that Alaska is considering expanding as well, but it may work out perfectly for you guys because we're probably at least 3 years out from that because we would have to develop a program and find that way. But we do, up until a year ago, you had to take a bar exam to get admitted to Alaska, but now we're like, nope, so long as you're admitted in another jurisdiction, you can waive in after 3 years. So the other way is the bar exam. We at the Alaska Bar Association, we're one of the members of the Uniform Bar Exam. So it's a bar exam that's created by NCBE and a whole bunch of different jurisdictions allow it right now. There are 37 jurisdictions that take it, but by the time you guys are, I'm assuming you're all going to law school, and then you're all going to take the bar exam. A new bar exam will be out. It'll be a shorter bar exam. And it'll be a less memorized based bar exam. So it's going to be more on practice area focused where you get packets of material to do it. So I think you guys are coming in at a good time. In addition, it's not just transferable over 37 jurisdictions. There's already been, I think, 43 jurisdictions who have said that they're going to accept the next gen bar. So it's a good time for you guys to be thinking about going to law school because there'll be a better bar exam when you're out. So, any questions about the background stuff so far? No,
Would you mind explaining what the bar is?
like the Alaska Bar Association.
And what a bar is?
That is such a great topic. So the
What's missing from this court?
yeah.
There's no bar.
So in Alaska, we are a mandatory bar state. That means that any single person who is an attorney has to be licensed by the Alaska Bar Association. I am the executive director of that organization. So we license all the attorneys in states. You have to be admitted through us. And then they're also subject to certain requirements. Some of those are continuing legal education. When you're a lawyer, you have to do 12 hours of education every single year. You're also subject to discipline. We are one of the only professions where we hold ourselves accountable. We are a self-regulated profession. Once you become an attorney, it is your obligation to notify each other and the bar if we notice someone breaking the rules. In addition, we are one of the only professions that if any of our attorneys were to lie or steal money from you, we create a fund of money that we pay back from. For instance, if I were to take you on as a client, we sign an agreement, you give me $1,000 to represent you, I ditch out of the country, you never hear me again, and you can't find me, you can come to the Bar Association, let us know. We have a fund of money that if you qualify, we will make you whole.
Thank
Yep. And so it's one of those things that we I think we all kind of consider it an honor, but there are extra duties on us as attorneys that we have to live up to. We're also, any member of the public or attorneys can file grievances against attorneys. And I'll get into a little bit of some ways that you guys can volunteer, but whenever a grievance is filed against an attorney, if we find that there's enough substance to those grievances, we set up a hearing panel. And the hearing panel is not just attorneys looking at it. We have members of the public like yourselves that will come in and say, no, I'm gonna sit in, this one member of the public and two attorneys, and we're gonna decide if this complaint merits discipline. That answer? Oh, you.
Yeah, I was just curious, could you give me some context about the shortage of lawyers in Alaska? What your thoughts are about the historic reputation of Alaska having one of the highest bar exam requirements for passing and been lowered a couple of years ago, partly to make it easier to attract lawyers in Alaska and bar one lawyers. But what are your thoughts about that, the culture of that here in Alaska? You know, is Alaska just seen it requiring or wanting to have higher standards of lawyers? And then also you mentioned about transferring to Alaska instead as well. So just wondering your thoughts how that all can be.
So that's a great question. So for those of you that may not know, our current bar exam, it's the uniform bar exam. Every state can create different cut scores that they say this is a pass on that bar exam. Up until a couple years ago, Alaska had the highest bar exam cut score of a 280. And what we did is we recently lowered it to 270. That was about 2 years ago now, I think. And that means, and then there were two other jurisdictions that had slightly higher bar exam scores. And then once we lowered it, they lowered theirs. So now we're still the highest. However, yeah. However, what I'll say is, I think one of the reasons that maybe our cut score has been higher is one, our law examiners, they're the attorneys that grade our exams. They say, no, this is what we think is needed to be a competent attorney. And so they've kind of set that marker in the sand. And I'll say it's not an unattainable standard. Don't think about the cut score. If you guys want to, if you are able to make it through law school and you're able to find time to study for the exam, I think you will pass the exam. But then going to your question, your second question was higher standard. Oh, this is what I was gonna say, is I think one of the reasons that maybe we had a higher exam for longer is that we are the only state in the country that does not have a law school. Even Puerto Rico has a law school. I think there's another territory that has a law school, but I'm blanking on it right now. And I think a lot of the other states and territories were kind of lobbied to lower their cut score, because one of the things that law schools are evaluated on is how many people pass the bar exam. And so if they are able to lower the cut score, then that makes the law school look better. And so I think there was more of that relationship. I think one thing that when we decided to open up our admission on motion to other states, our thinking was, what is the best predictor of who's going to be a good lawyer? That you passed a bar exam or that you've been practicing as an attorney for 3 years? And we said the best predictor of who's going to be an attorney is that you practice law for 3 years. So it doesn't matter if you didn't get in via a bar exam. It doesn't matter if you got in through a state with a lower cut score. Does that answer your question?
And that's exactly what I was hoping you would say, is that it's not, you know, what is the indicator? Is it really just a one exam and really say that that's an easy, fair?
Yeah.
Like,
And I think the hope too is the next gen bar exam. It's always tough when you have an exam as a barrier to entry. Is for us, we like to think of it as you need a minimum competency to be an attorney, because if you're a member of the public, you want to make sure that you're going to an attorney that is able to do their job. Yes, you can bet people and get someone who's specializes in family law, or pretty much all of these attorneys are more experienced, and I would trust them in the court before myself. But you want to find someone with that specialty, but we at the Bar Association, if we're licensing attorneys, we want to guarantee a level of minimum competency for the members of the public.
And I'll say, I took the older bar, obviously not the next gen bar, to be admitted at the high score of 280. I also took an early version of the next gen bar as a tester for Themis, and then did some bar prep coaching. And I think that the next gen is a far better indicator of what you're gonna do. A whole day of answering multiple choice questions where there's two correct answers and you have to figure out what the tester thinks is the most correct answer. I don't think is an indicator of your ability to read law, to understand law, to make argument, to be there for it. And so that's kind of the purpose of the next gen, is to have those more like practical testing and not memorization testing.
So I think we've gone through like how to become a lawyer. And so now that you guys, are all of you guys UAA students? Okay, so I'm gonna kind of focus this towards you. How can you guys go to an accredited law school? I wanna let you know that you guys are lucky. Every single Alaska university has partnerships with law schools. UAA has 3 partnerships with law schools. One is with Mitchell Hamlin, the other is Case Western, and the other is Willamette. These partnerships are all a little bit different. UAA has a great webpage that kind of outlines all the requirements. Also, our website links to that website so that you guys can look at that information. So those programs, most of them have like a minimum GPA and a minimum LSAT score. And so long as you meet those and you are a graduate of UAA, or you're about to graduate UAA, I forget the timing of it, how it sets out, then you are eligible for these partnerships. And so what those partnerships offer is most of them offer a direct admission. Going to law school is a competitive thing. And so having a program set up where if you meet these minimums, you are automatically admitted is such an advantage for you guys as UAA students. The other thing that's great about these partnership programs is most of them offer some form of tuition reduction. Some are as much as you get 50% off your tuition. Some are $10,000 off, some offer in-state tuition. Another thing, again, we don't have a law school up here, but one thing that's kind of helped us with that is some places have took pity on us, or maybe more so are trying to just get all of you highly qualified new attorneys, and they offer in-state tuition to Alaskans. Maine Law School offers in-state tuition, William Mitchell offers in-state tuition to Alaskan students. So for those of you going, it's investment of time, it's investment of money, that's a thing. There's also some partnerships, none at UAA, but some partnerships that offer 4, it's a 3+3 program. So you're able to take out a whole year of between your undergrad and law school. So you're able to do 7 years of school in 6. So another thing that some other partnerships have out there. The other thing I wanted to point out to you, I've mentioned this before, there are no law schools in Alaska. But one thing that is incredible, it wasn't the case for us when we went to law school, but Jessica was lucky that it was the case for her, is there are now remote law schools. You guys are eligible to go to 17 law schools that you can take while mostly living in Alaska. So you don't necessarily have to leave. And a lot of those law schools you can take with asynchronous schedules. So you can go and like still maintain a job while you go to law school, which is just an incredible thing. Where are those remote law schools, you may ask? On our website. Thank you for laughing with me and maybe at me, I'm not sure. But just want to make sure you guys know that that's all there. And then another thing that's out there and available for law students is there are scholarships. And not just any scholarships, there are scholarships that are specifically targeted to Alaskans. We at the Alaska Bar Association have created an Alaska scholarship that is for people with ties to Alaska and an intent to return. We've been going on this for about 5 years now and have given out around $100,000 of scholarships. And they're in the process of trying to create an endowment so we can even get larger scholarships. So that is something you can do. Another thing that you can, while you're practicing, the Alaska Bar Association has, I mentioned earlier, you have to be an attorney to go into court and represent people. We also have created quite a few practice waivers, some specifically for people who are in law school or who haven't been licensed by the bar yet, so you can practice for a limited amount of time under supervision of other lawyers. So additional ways that you can also, sometimes you can get college credits or earn money and get that experience as you become a lawyer. And then the last thing I want to kind of point out to you from kind of the bar perspective of going to law school, I'd mentioned that the bar is a self-regulating profession. And also, because of that, we're one of the few professions that we have a character and fitness component to be admitted. And so when you're applying to law school, my advice to you guys is be honest to law school. There's nothing precluding you from having a criminal background or any history. I can get more into it later if we have time about some of those specifics, but as you're starting this part of your path, make sure that you disclose relevant information on the application when they ask for it. Don't assume, oh, well, maybe they won't find out about it, because by the time you get to the bar level, we're doing background checks or we do fingerprint checks and things like that. So it's better to we are a profession where you can have any background for the most part, so long as you're willing that you've learned from it and moved on. So take this chance as you're like, yeah, you have some things in your past, make sure you're disclosing them when they're asked. And then before we turn the panel, I'm gonna have one last thing, and it's the ways you can get involved now. Because you guys are all already in these programs or came here, so you're probably interested. One of the ways that you guys can get involved now is, even as I mentioned, we had the Alaska Bar, we're a mandatory bar, all attorneys have to be licensed through us. But we have a lot of things that involve non-attorneys as well. We have a lot of committees and sections. One of the committees I kind of highlighted was our discipline committee, which requires us to have public members. Is anyone here over 25? You are all eligible to be on our discipline committee. We're actually doing committee solicitation right now. So if you want information, I have an email on this card, info@alaskabar.org. And email me and I'll send you information on the discipline committee specifically, but you can join those. Will be a great thing to put on your resume as you apply to law school, but we'll get your resume and things like that. And if you're appointed by the Chief Justice of the Alaska Supreme Court, how great would that be on your resume? You can then be on committee hearings with 2 other attorneys to decide if attorneys need discipline. So you're the one deciding, should there be a disbarment, or should they be suspended, or maybe it doesn't raise to that level and just they need to be warned about their behavior. But it's a great way to figure out how to become more about the pitfalls of being an attorney before you get started. Another thing that you can do is we have other committees like our Fair and Impartial Courts Committee, which helps spread the word about our judicial retention and selection system. And then also, if you guys want to be my boss, our organization is overseen by a board. And so we have 9 attorney members and 3 non-attorney members, who the 3 non-attorney members are appointed by the governor. So being one of our board members is something that interests you, you can apply. It's through the Alaska Boards and Commissions page. You send in your information to the governor. We currently have a vacant spot. So all of you guys, I'm inviting you to be my boss. Another thing we have is we have substantive law sections. We have like the family law section or environmental law. And so they're geared towards attorneys, but non-attorneys can join those for $15 for a year. So if you already know what type of law you want to practice, feel free to reach out to us and we can give you information on how you can sign up. I also like to tell people, so we're the mandatory bar, but there are so many local and affinity bars. For instance, here in Anchorage alone, we have the Anchorage Association of Women Lawyers. We have the Anchorage Bar Association. We also have some more statewide, but have eligibility here, which is the Federal Bar, which they do stuff in federal court as opposed to state court. There's also the Criminal Defense Lawyers Group. There's the Alaska BIPOC, Black Indigenous People of Color Bar Association. There's the Lavender Lawyers. That's the LGBTQ plus attorneys. And I'm probably forgetting 1 or 2. So if you guys want to join those, a lot of them take on non-attorneys as members because they see you guys as being the future attorneys. And if we can get you involved now, you're just going to be better attorneys by the time you get there. Other things you guys can do, maybe for extra credit. We at the Alaska Bar Association, we do a quarterly publication called the Alaska Bar Rate. We're completely, sorry guys, we are completely submission based. And so if there are things going on in the legal community or that are legal issues that you think deserve acknowledgement, you can submit them to us and we may publish them. We also have a law review, which is our more scholarly publication. And I can put you in contact with our law review people to see if maybe if you're working on a project that can get converted into a law review article. And then the last thing I want to point out to you is the whole time I've been talking about this postcard, I was talking about the how to become a lawyer, get involved side. Flip it over. We have a QR code to our employment bulletin board. And I want to point that out to you guys because we at the Alaska Bar maintain job listings. All law firms and state entities can post for free. And not only do they post attorney jobs, they post non-attorney jobs. Those are the paralegal, legal, admin positions I talked about. And then we have a whole nother board for clerkships and internships. How many of you guys know that there is a paid internship at the federal court right now that all of you are eligible for? That is on our site. So just, it's another thing to keep in mind. And a requirement of our board is, of our employment board is it has to list salary ranges because, we feel like that's important. We don't want to waste people looking for time. So that's a lot of information for me. Any questions before I turn it over to the more fun part?
I think you're over promising.
All right.
Yeah, and if, actually, I have one question, if you wouldn't mind speaking to it a little bit more before we turn to the panel. Could you just speak to what the application process does look like for someone with a criminal record?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So as I said, we do have a character and fitness component. And so we have questions on our application of, have you ever been charged with an offense that excluding a minor traffic offense or something like that? Have you ever been charged with a juvenile offense? In some jurisdictions, there are, like, if you're ever charged with a felony, you are not able to ever be admitted to the bar. We are not one of those jurisdictions. What we do is we do it on a weighted basis. There's all of these things are just a cause for inquiry. So let's say I, in my youth, I, vandalized a whole bunch of cars. I then had a whole bunch of drinking, minor possession issues. I then, into my adult ages, was a drug dealer for a while. Those things wouldn't necessarily mean I couldn't become a lawyer. In fact, having that type of background might make you a better lawyer. Because one of the things I think makes a good lawyer is that you're able to relate to the people that you're serving. And so what we instead do look at is some of the inquiry factors. We look at, what was your age at the time of that? How much time has passed? Have there been redeeming things that have happened in your life since that time? Have you given retribution? There's a whole bunch of factors. If you're really nerdy like I am, you can go to Bar Rule 2 and we literally list out all the inquiry factors and all the ways that we weight those factors. So it's spelled out there. So I say that to remind you guys that your background, you shouldn't consider your background to be a sense of shame. I would actually say it's probably the thing. If you have a sketchier background, that's the best word. It's probably going to mean that you're going to come with your experience. And I say that not even from having a criminal background, but I would say, in my opinion, some of the best, I'm probably getting into questions, some of the best attorneys that I know are people that weren't pre-law majors. They were like music history majors or people that were true to themselves, because you being true to yourself is going to eventually make you the attorney you want to be.
Thank you so much, I really appreciate that. Okay, I'm now going to turn to our incredible panel. Thank you all so much for coming today. Today we're joined by Brian Schroeder, the former U.S. Attorney for the District of Alaska from 2017 to 2021, Eric Glatt, the Legal Director of the ACLU of Alaska, and Jessica Falk, an Associate Attorney or Senior Associate?
Partner.
Oh, I'm so sorry, attorney. With Nyquist Law Group. No, you're good. It wasn't in the box. That's my bad. And yes, thank you all so much for coming today. Jessica, would we be able to start with you?
Sure. Yeah.
We'd love for you to share a bit more about your pathway to law school, particularly how your experience at UAA helped prepare you for becoming an attorney and what it was like doing law school remotely from Alaska.
Yeah, so first I'll let you know what my pathway was. So I was a very non-traditional student. I went to school. I actually started college when I was in high school, and then I decided when I graduated high school, I didn't want to do college anymore. I wanted to be a server and then eventually a bartender, and I made a ton of money and I didn't want to go to school. And then eventually I decided that wasn't enough for me. And I went back to school. So I spent my partner an email the same day that I applied to transfer my scores from Washington to UAA in the legal studies program and said, hey, I'm interested in getting back into, I'm interested in law. I've always been interested in law. Do you have a job opening? You know, I'm interested in being a paralegal for you, because she had talked to me about it previously. So I started at Nyquist Law as a legal assistant. There wasn't a paralegal spot available. And I went back to UAA to finish my bachelor's. I went part-time and worked full-time, and finished my bachelor's in legal studies in the spring of 2022. No, the spring of 2019. And then I started Mitchell Hamlin the fall of 2019. Mitchell Hamlin is a remote program. It's developed a little bit since when I started. We had a cohort system then, and it was, they had a remote program, and then they had a brick and mortar program. Now they have a few hybrids and they have some other things available. But it was one of 3 at the time remote law schools. I have children, I have a job here, I had bills, I didn't want to move, and I didn't think I could move. So if I wanted to go to law school, I needed to go remotely. And I did. And what happened after the fall of 2019 was COVID. So all of those in-person times that I was supposed to go to law school were on Zoom at 4 a.m. because it was Central Time. And we were on Zoom for 12-hour days during our intensives instead of being there in person. So I actually only had to travel to Minnesota. I think it was 3 times total, due to COVID restrictions, and then opening back up. Then I graduated from Mitchell Hamlin. It's a 4-year program when you do it remotely, but you have opportunities to do J-term in summer. I finished in 3. And so I graduated in the spring of 2022. I took the July 2022 bar, and then I was admitted to the bar in November of 2022. And so the entire time that I finished undergrad, I quickly became a paralegal. I worked as a paralegal until I got to law school. Halfway through law school, I took advantage of Bar Rule 44, which you can be a legal intern that's supervised by a licensed practitioner. And I was able to go to court. I was able to sign and write pleadings. The licensed bar member just had to supervise me and go to court with me. Once I graduated law school, and between the time that I graduated law school and I got my bar results, I used another portion of Bar Rule 44 to be a supervised practitioner, which means that I still had to have a licensed practitioner supervise me. They didn't have to go to court with me. I could sign my own pleadings. I could attend mediations by myself. I just had to consult with her, and she had to kind of just look at what I was doing. Once I became licensed, I hit the ground running. I had already been in court by myself by that point. I had been in court as a paralegal, and then I was in court supervised with my boss and mentor right next to me, being able to give me direct feedback on what I was doing. And so by the time that I was licensed on my own, I felt like it was just the training wheels coming off, right? I mean, I'm still a baby lawyer the first 5 years. I'm getting there, but I think that the more practical experiences that you have throughout undergrad, throughout law school, makes you a better attorney. And like take those opportunities. I'm gonna plug the pro bono committee. That's also one where we take non-attorney members if you want to do that. But there's a ton of opportunities in Alaska to do things. Practicing law in Alaska is fun. We are a brand new state. In family law especially, the law changes every Friday. It is very fun. We are creating law. And so it's a really cool place to practice law. It's a really small community. And yeah, that was my pathway. Now I'm a partner at a small family law firm. And I love it. I like practicing law in Alaska.
Amazing, thank you so much. Eric, I'm gonna ask you a very similar question. Please describe your pathway to the law. And particularly, I'd be curious about your decision to pursue law mid-career and how your prior work experience has informed your work as an attorney.
So as Helen references, I went to law school later in life, so I was in my 40s when I decided to go. I had been, in high school, I was a debater, and a lot of people doing debate are like, oh, I'm gonna be a lawyer, and did it in college, and everyone said, I'm gonna be a lawyer. But I had, both my parents are refugees who started their working lives as soon as they were done with high school. So I didn't have a lot of modeling or like an idea what the pathway was. And all I knew about lawyers was what I saw on TV. And I was like, well, yeah, I guess I could do that, but I guess I could just be a really good asshole. I didn't have a concept of what it would mean to be a lawyer. So I went in a very different direction, and was, looking for my path that would bring me, more satisfaction in life. And at some point in my forties, kind of hit a wall. I was working on Wall Street and was not very happy. And through, I guess, a weird sequence of chances, I came to understand this whole idea of public interest law. Like, oh, you don't have to be an asshole. You can actually work for the public good in a number of different ways. And also learned about something, that was novel, still novel, which is, public service loan forgiveness. So it's a federal program through which, if you take out only federal loans to pay for your tuition at law school, in theory, after you work for 120, 120 months at an employer who is either a government entity or a 501c3 nonprofit, those loans are entirely forgiven, and you don't have to pay a dime. Or you may have to pay a small percentage along the way. Unfortunately for me, my law school actually also had a program that paid a little bit along the way as well. So when I joke that in theory, this is how it works, is the thing is, it was brand new when I started, enrolled in law school. That program hadn't even existed for 10 years yet, so that the first cohort of people could have their loans forgiven. And since that time, it has subsequently gotten tangled in litigation. So it's a little unclear exactly how that's all going to play itself out. I'm confident it will work because there's a legal concept called detrimental reliance, and I relied on the promise of those loans that eventually being forgiven when I made these, assumed this massive amount of debt. So, but it's a massive amount of debt that I took on late in life that I would not have done at that point in my life if I wasn't confident it would ultimately get forgiven. But because I had a very different prior career, including an MBA from Case Western, which I guess you said UAA has a connection to the law school. I went to business school there. And I do think having a lot of different non-lawyer work experience has given me a lot of non-traditional sort of benefits in the role I have. So it did work out. And I'll say that was one thing when I was wrestling with the question of what can I do to be happier with my career. And I landed on the question of, wow, the law, this thing I thought about once when I was younger, but dismissed because I thought it would make me unhappy. When I saw that there was a pathway to feel like it was doing something good and worthwhile and I could be proud of. It was also became clear to me that it's one of the few career paths that is really open to people starting later in life. There's a lot of careers, if you haven't cut your teeth by the end of your 20s, forget about it. You're never going to find the door opening for you. But the law is one of those places where you go to law school, pass the bar, and make yourself available to start in this new direction. You will find a way forward. I guess finally, I would also just add to the issue about having an advantage by already being here in Alaska is really very real. When I engaged in screening people to be hired, to come up here, it helps so much to know the person's gonna be happy living here. Because as a state without a law school, if you're working for an employer looking to hire new attorneys, you will get lots of applicants from non-Alaskans and people who've never been here before, and it is always rolling the dice. Because some people show up here and you know what, the weather's a little extreme, and some people don't like it. So knowing that somebody's comfortable here and really wants to be here is a huge leg up when it comes to getting hired.
Thanks, Eric. Brian, shockingly, it's gonna be a very similar question. You're right. Could you please share a little bit more about your pathway to law school and for you, how your experience in the military impacted, or shaped your path?
Yeah, so, as Ellen mentioned, I came at the law through the military. I graduated from the Coast Guard Academy, and I was a Coast Guard officer, I had 3 tours as a Coast Guard officer before going to law school. One on a ship that was up here, ship in Seattle, we spent all our time in Alaska, and then a couple of law enforcement jobs in Southern California. And all the military services have programs for mid-level officers to go back for advanced degrees of various types, and law is one of them. So I qualified for that program from the Coast Guard, and they sent me to school, to law school at UW down in Seattle. And it is the best possible way to go to law school. Because not only are they paying for the whole thing, it's your job for 3 years. So you get your full salary while you're going. So it's really, I don't think there's a better way to go to graduate school, law school. And then it's a really fun job when you get done. Coast Guard, my first assignment was to the Coast Guard's main office in Juneau, which covers all of Alaska. So it's kind of like an in-house counsel job. And it's great because there's just everything, every day is something new. Coast Guard does, people don't realize, but the Coast Guard does a lot of different things. Law enforcement, search and rescue. Coast Guard also is the regulatory agency for the merchant marine fleet and for merchant mariners. So there's a regulatory aspect to it. It's just a really great job. I had 6 different assignments as a Coast Guard lawyer. The second one was here in Anchorage as a special assistant U.S. attorney with the U.S. Attorney's Office, where I primarily prosecuted environmental crimes. So at the end of my Coast Guard career, I was 24 years as an officer. When I retired, the U.S. attorney at the time, now Judge Burgess, was the guy I'd done all my environmental crimes cases with. So I called him up and said, I was just telling him because we were friends, hey, Tim, I'm moving back to Alaska. And he said, I'll hire you. So that was my job interview. So that was pretty easy. And so I was a federal prosecutor for the next 16 years. 11 years is what they call a line prosecutor. Started off doing drug and gun cases, worked my way up to doing white collar crime, which was fun. And then I was a supervisor for about a year, and I kind of stuck around long enough, they made me the boss. So for my last 4 years, I was the United States Attorney, which is the best job ever. So I tell people that, you know, when you're the U.S. Attorney, there's 93 different U.S. attorneys, and you work for the Deputy Attorney General in Washington. That's your line chart. So that's it. And on any given day, every given day for the most part, the Deputy Attorney General of the United States does not care about what you're doing in Alaska. And I don't mean that negatively. I just mean as you all are aware, there's a million things going on in Washington, D.C. And as long as I'm not causing trouble, they really don't care what goes on out here. And that gives you a lot of freedom. I mean, you can not do anything if you want and kind of get away with it, or you can go do great, fun stuff. And I think that's what we did. I was lucky. I had a group of law enforcement chiefs, the chief of police of APD, head of the troopers, head of the FBI, all terrific professionals. And we really, did a lot of good stuff. And I just remember that time very fondly. But it was a political appointee. So in 2021, I was done. All political appointees resign at the end of, when there's a new president. And I worked for a law firm for a couple of years. So I have that little bit of experience too. I found out the law firm world really wasn't what I wanted to do with my life at that point. So I did that for a couple of years and then I just retired. So, and now I do stuff like this and a number of other things too.
Great, thank you so much. I know some of you have had multiple different careers in the law as well, but I was wondering if you could each describe what a typical day would look like in your practice, just to give students an idea of the variety of ways that legal practice can look. And I know from my own experience, no, there is no typical day most times. Yeah, it is a very quickly moving field. But I can share a little bit.
I guess I'll start. So I work in private practice. So we're a small law firm. what is called a boutique law firm. We primarily practice family law. We also do some probate, some criminal that comes in. We have the opportunity to be choosy with clients and, so we do keep track of our trial days. I think for a civil attorney, we go to trial more than any other civil attorney. Last year, I was substantively in court 66 days, which is a significant time to be in evidentiary hearings or trials. And so, depending on what my day looks like, I do drafting. I do my own drafting still, even though I have paralegals that also do drafting. I work very collaboratively with our paralegals. I always say that paralegals in our office are like what nurses are to doctors. They can do everything but sign the prescription. They do legal research. So we case plan what we're doing, what's going on, what we're gonna file or what we're doing to prep. Today, I obviously had this. I was running a little late because we are getting trial exhibits out. I have trial coming up. Our deadline for trial exhibits to exchange is today, so I was working with my paralegal on pulling all of the exhibits that we want, marking them and making sure they go out. I also had 2 deadlines, so I had to get filings in, so I finished the final drafting of one, sent it to my paralegal to second set. Another paralegal finished the first drafting of one, sent it to me the second set, and we got all that out today. So that was my typical day today. It's a busy day.
Yeah, so, I've only recently returned to the American Civil Liberties Union of Alaska. It was my first job up here when I moved up here in 2015. And at that time, the affiliate was very small, and I would just finished law school and was the only day-to-day practicing attorney at the affiliate. And so that day was very different than what it was like when I came back recently. And I just started as the legal director in February. And now we have there's 4 attorneys who report to me and a paralegal. Helen is one of the 4 attorneys who reports to me. So it's a very different organization than it was when I first came up here. I think one thing that's distinct, there's a handful of litigation practice nonprofits up here. There's only a relatively small number. And that means that we are not driven, our finances are not driven by paying clients and billing by the hour and figuring out how we can cover our overhead by making sure we've done enough billable hours. Most of our income comes from grants and donors giving us money to pursue the mission work. So the day-to-day life at a law firm like the ACLU is very different than it is in a private practice. And our mission-driven work means that our lawyers aren't necessarily spending as much time litigating cases to the highest volume possible at the highest degree of skill, but also advising the policy team, also talking with the communications team, because we do a lot of public communications. It's coming to events like this. So there's a variety, there's sort of a more of a mixture in litigating and doing other work that promotes justice, and particularly for the Civil Liberties Union, civil liberties and civil rights of all Alaskans, and expanding that frontier. I'll quickly divert to say, Brian mentioned, if you keep your head down, the Attorney General in DC is going to pay too much attention. And you mentioned like the law changes every Friday when the Supreme Court hands down new cases. One of the things that's so exciting about practicing constitutional law in Alaska is because it is such a young state, there are whole areas of constitutional decision-making and jurisprudence that have yet to be explored. And we've already pushed past the federal civil liberties rights for Alaskans on several fronts, where the Alaska Supreme Court has said, we go further than the US Supreme Court goes on these handful of different issue areas. And there are still more issue areas where the boundaries have yet to even be tested. So to practice this kind of law in Alaska is also very exciting.
For me, I would say one area that I'll answer is just being as an executive director of an organization. My day to day, it varies so much. from one moment, I'm having to figure out, we also like own our building, so sometimes I'm a property manager, sometimes I have to figure out what the HVAC filtration system should be during COVID. Sometimes I am dealing with all the hiring decisions of our organization, so if we get someone that is leaving, I'm trying to post the job, find the things for that. If someone, because I work at the bar association, if an attorney has a complaint, if it's big enough, it usually comes to me, so I get yelled at a decent amount, but I also get yelled at by usually the most logical, reasonable people. And so I'm able to, figure out and work with them on things. I also get to work on really interesting initiatives. When we change the bar exam cut score, I'm there creating working groups with people to investigate whether or not we should do this. Unlike a lot of the people up here, I am pretty much never in court. The only time that I am in court is when I am presenting in front of the Supreme Court. And even those situations are less court-like. It's more just me at a table with the entirety of the Alaska Supreme Court, and I'm presenting a rule change or I'm presenting an initiative and trying to convince them. And so it's fun to be at a table with some of the smartest people and try to change their mind and make it things that substantially affect all attorneys. Another fun initiative that I forgot to mention during my kind of speech earlier is that we do things like we put on a legal career fair. This summer, July 30th, mark your calendars, we'll be doing a career fair. We invite members of the legal community in. We also do like a reception so that you can meet other attorneys while you're there. So I would say it very much day-to-day changes, but it's fun and I like it. The thing I repeat the most is I love and I hate my job more than I thought I would when I got it.
That might be true for all attorneys.
Well, for me, it kind of depends on the job. I've had a bunch of different jobs, so it kind of depends on which job. For example, when I was in the Coast Guard I worked at the central office here in Alaska, and I also worked in the central office for the Coast Guard in Miami for Florida and Florida and the Caribbean, which is a whole completely different ballgame. But in those places, your day could be, somebody calls and says, from a ship, and says, we've got a problem. We need to court martial somebody. Okay, so let's talk about how that process goes. Or, an HR problem, or we've got a ship alongside a sinking Haitian wooden boat with 200 migrants on it that we gotta save. And what are we gonna do with them when we get them on board? Those issues. I mean, it was really quite a varied practice. And like Danielle says, that's fascinating. That makes for a quick day when it goes that way. I also had a really interesting job really weird one, where the Coast Guard had somebody at the United States mission to the UN, which is in effect the embassy to the United Nations. And I was in the political section there. So a day might include going to a Security Council meeting I negotiated a couple of Security Council resolutions while I was there, which is really a weird thing for a Coast Guard guy to be doing, but it was pretty fascinating. As a prosecutor, it's more kind of standard. You come in, you look at your cases. Do I have a hearing that day? No hearing that day. Do I have writings, pleadings due that day or not? Do I have a grand jury session that day? But most of your time, you're kind of talking to the agents about cases. You have 30, 40 cases on your plate. Luckily in the federal system, that's about all. My colleagues in the state system, that's probably more like 100, but we can be more selective. But so you're calling the agents, hey, what's going on here? What are we doing with that case? How close are we to being able to charge? And then as you get closer, to being able to charge a case, setting it up for grand jury, getting your charging documents done. And then once you're on a pathway once you charge, then, hey, are we negotiating a plea agreement? Most criminal cases are handled by plea agreements. But occasionally you go to trial. Trials, a ton of work. I heard somebody say the other day that I hadn't really thought about it that way, but said as a rule of thumb, if a trial is going to take a week, it takes a month of preparation for that week. And I think that's probably pretty close, because I've had some 4 or 5 week trials and it took 5 or 6 months to get ready for this. So it's a trial work's a ton of work. So if that's what you want to do, be ready for that. I'm not saying everybody else's isn't a ton of work, but that is a ton of work.
Helen, do you mind if I jump into the previous, I realize that all of our jobs we've been talking about are very extroverted jobs, but I want to say my job before coming into this, I was the forms attorney for the Alaska court system. And so I created and maintained all the forms with the court system. I've become an expert in the subject area, create forms for both the public to use so that you don't need to know the law, you just fill in the blanks. I created similar things for judges to help them arrive at the answers. And I would say typically, I knew what my day was gonna be like when I got in, I knew what it was gonna be like when I left. I had a meeting with people like every 3 days or so. And so there are jobs where you are just writing and researching. So I just wanna make sure you guys know, it varies.
That's a perfect job.
That's a good point.
Shy flower like you did.
It's a great point. Thank you so much for sharing that. I have many questions to ask, but I would love if anyone in the audience has questions or things that they would be curious to hear from the panel. I can also ask one more. Okay, keep reflecting on it. Or, yeah,
Sorry,
hop on
I
it.
hate that outline.
No, you're good.
To your experience working in the Coast Guard, did you ever have experience or what is your knowledge about working as a JAG lawyer and what that would look like as well? Did you ever have any experience or time in military tribunals? And is that differ distinctly versus?
Not tribunals, I've never done, like Gitmo, I didn't do anything like that, but I did court martials, I did plenty of court martials. Coast Guard lawyers are now called JAG attorneys, we weren't called that when I first started, but, and it's very similar to the JAG practice in kind of any other service, with the exception of DoD lawyers probably spend more time on what I would call ops law, operational law. How to fight the war, basically. We, the Coast Guard folks, don't have to do that much. Now, we have to do criminal stuff. We have to, we're out there enforcing the law, so you have to have a better kind of functional knowledge of Fourth, Fifth Amendment kind of things that the DoD guys do. But yeah, they would do more of that than more of the ops law. And we have a regulatory function, which DoD generally does not. So when it comes to merchant mariners and regulating the merchant marine community, we have that practice as well. So a lot of it's similar, but a couple of differences.
Thank you. I was wondering if each of you could also share a bit about your own law school application process and how you decided what law school to attend for folks who are currently preparing for that process or currently engaged in it.
I'm probably the most recent law school applicant. It was a little bit different for me because I wanted to go to law school. I knew I wanted to work and I was working in law. I knew I wanted to continue working in law. We're very lucky at my law firm. We have several paralegals that have Juris Doctorates and do not practice law. And so I realized that I could continue being a paralegal and have a really wonderful career being a non-lawyer. And I thought about that because I couldn't relocate. It just wasn't an option for me to move. I have children, they're established in the community. I had to work. I couldn't relocate. And so there was only a few options for me at that time. This is pre-COVID. There were a few they're called hybrid options that were ABA certified. And with the hybrid options, you had the opportunity to apply. And then there's certain intensives that you have to go to get your in-person credit hours, pursuant to what the ABA rules were at that time. The ABA rules have expanded since that time, and there are so many more remote law school programs. Mitchell Hamlin has, during COVID, was consulting with like every law school, trying to figure out how people's educations could not get disrupted with that. And so they have a really good remote program. I felt very connected to my cohort, even though we were all across the United States, and internationally. And, it was a really good program. But when I first started, I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I only applied to Mitchell Hamlin. I looked at the law schools that were available, long distance. I looked at the ratings. I reached out and talked to some people that have gone through the programs. We have a lot of Mitchell Hamlin alumni in Alaska, and I thought that Mitchell Hamlin was going to be the right call for me. I applied, I got the maximum amount of tuition percentage off, and I just thought I knew that I was gonna go there. And so luckily I got in the first time and I went. I have a colleague who I can talk to. She's the GAL for the state, and she decided to go to law school, and she was looking at programs. She applied to Mitchell Hamlin, she didn't get in. She applied to Vermont Law, she did get in, so she's going to Vermont. Vermont also has a distance program now, or a hybrid program. So yeah, that's what I knew I wanted to do. My suggestion, because we've talked about how this is a big financial commitment, and it is. It's easy to think of student loans as something that's just kind of like out there in the universe that you'll deal with later, but let me tell you, later comes to roost. You're gonna have to pay them. And so unless you do, 10 years of public service. And even then, it may not be available for you, depending on what happens with federal law, right? And so I would say that you want to make your packages, your application package as attractive as possible. You want to apply to multiple places unless you're in a position with, like me, where I was like, this is the only school I can go to. You want to apply to multiple places because you want to see what's the best financial package they can give you. You want to look at schools. You may not know what you want to do going into law school. One of the reasons I picked Mitchell Hamlin too is that they had a nationally ranked mediation and arbitration program, and I was really interested in that. So you want to look at places and see what they offer. You want to look at law schools. In my opinion, you should look at law schools that have a lot of practical implications. You want law schools that offer clinics. You want law schools that offer credit for internships. You want those law schools that are concentrating not just on, kind of an older way of learning law, like memorizing and we're gonna call on you in the Socratic method and you need to know exactly what we're talking about. You want a law school that's gonna look at you practically and develop. I mean, law has changed. When you're in private practice, it is a client-centered practice, and it's not a thing where people just come to you because you're a lawyer and you're the only lawyer available and you give them whatever service you want to give them. That's not where it is anymore. We're a service business, and you need to practically have those skills. And if you go to a law school, I've talked to many people that have come into, they've passed the bar, they've come into their job and they have no idea what they're doing because they've not done it. And so any opportunity that you get to make your package more attractive, you want to do things like be involved in the law, take those non-lawyer opportunities, volunteer. There's tons of free legal clinics and law-related activities you can volunteer for. Reach out. We're such a small legal community. I mean, you can email the Alaska Innocence Project and just say like, hey, I'm interested in donating some time. Do you have something for me to do? And they'll set you up. Like, you can reach out to people, find something you're interested in, and build that package, build your application package.
I don't have anything substantively to add. I think that covered it. But I would just say the only change for me is I went to University of Minnesota Law School. One thing that was also ended up being attractive for me, I didn't know it at the time. When I thought I was getting out of the law, being in law school, I realized I could get 2 degrees for the price of 1. So I was also able at the University of Minnesota to get my master's in urban regional planning. I ended up using that to serve on Planning and Zoning Commission, and helps with other board work I do. So it was nice to have that. But I think the practicality and things that Jessica was talking to is some money.
Did you go?
No, but I
I was gonna say, I think they skipped you, so.
No, I mean, but I think, yeah, the practical experience is invaluable, and also sitting from the perspective of someone who hires about to be graduates, knowing that somebody has some kind of practical experience is really valuable. In my experience, I did not do my homework ahead of time about taking the LSAT. When I didn't realize that law schools use rolling admission, so I applied to every law school I applied to on the last day you could, and only later realized, oh, they start accepting people right when the first ones come in the door months before that. So that's one, don't make that mistake. As far as I was concerned though, for deciding where to go, it's interesting, I applied to one law school that prided itself, that was Northeastern, on doing both practical and public interest focus. The whole program there is focused on churning out experienced public interest attorneys in a number of different fields. I applied to CUNY, the City University of New York, which was the only one that had on its application, because it's a New York City public school training people for public service. The application said, what kind of public interest law do you want to do? And I ended up choosing a school that happened to have a really robust career office for a dedicated career office for public interest attorneys. And that was partly on the advice of the then, the solicitor of the Department of Labor, who put me in touch with a number of different people at different law schools, and they all said, if that's what you want to do, go there. Because not only are you going to meet the right kind of people to help place you, you're also going to meet other students who are looking at this like you, and you won't feel like everyone else wants to go to big law and do firm work, but you're going to find other like-minded folks. And I'll just really quickly use it as another example of a later in life attorney. One of my buddies there was a flight attendant for Alaska Airlines who had enough seniority. He could schedule the minimum number of flights he needed to fly to maintain his employment status during law school breaks, and hated law school until somebody talked him into doing a clinic as a public defender. And he went, oh, I like this. I think I'll actually stick it out and get my JD. And now he's still a flight attendant who also has a public defense practice.
And also another one of your classmates is now an attorney with the ACLU of Alaska.
Yeah, another one of my classmates is one of the 4 attorneys who replaced me.
Yeah, my selection of law school was kind of somewhat driven by the Coast Guard because they were paid. And they had a policy at the time that they wanted you to go either where you were assigned or where you could be assigned as a lawyer. So they only had to move you once. I was living in San Diego at the time. The law school there, University of San Diego, was a private school. It sounds weird to say I didn't want to stay in San Diego, but I kind of didn't want to stay in San Diego because it's like, I don't know how you study in that way. So I thought I probably needed to get out. I wanted to stay on the West Coast. So I applied at University of Washington up in Seattle, which there's a Coast Guard office there. So they could have assigned me there when I left, although they didn't. And at the time, UW gave in-state tuition to military officers. So that was $2,700 in 1988, for those of you keeping track. And USD was 11,000. So I went to the Coast Guard and said, yeah, how about if you send me here where what you'll pay in tuition is less than 1 year down there? And that's where I went. And I wanted to go to, a good school, and UW is a great school. And the Coast Guard also tells you in these programs, don't bother applying to like Harvard or Yale or those kind of schools, because we won't pay for that. So when I got out, one of my colleagues, who's a good friend of mine, who had gone to Stanford, and I used to tell him, well, my $2,700 a year at UW got you the ability to go to Stanford. Should be nice today. So. But can I tell one similar story though to what Jeff said that I thought was interesting? This may be another question, but he talked about having, the flight attendant story, which is a great one. One of my best friends in law school was an aeronautical engineer at UW. That's what she graduated with. It's like, the heck you going to law school? She went and she had a specialty in composites, and she went to work for a patent firm in Seattle that did a lot of work for Boeing. And God knows how much more money she's made than I have. So, there are some really weird pathways, but there's kind of something for everybody almost up there.
Definitely. Can I do one more question, and then we can transition to breaking out the smaller groups? And actually on that note, each of you have mentioned different mentors in your life and how they've informed your journey to law school. And I was wondering if you could speak to that a bit more directly about what role has mentoring played in your experience and pathway to the law? What do you think makes a good mentorship?
You want to start over there this time?
Sure.
Wait a second.
Kind of that concept is kind of built into the military. You always have, senior officers in in your chain who are there, and I will tell you that some of them have been good and some have not been so good. But the one, I learned something, part of it is I think you gotta put yourself in a position that, hey, I'm gonna learn something from everybody. And try to take advantage of all those people, in your chain, but, I've got a couple of very good ones and it makes a significant difference and, having somebody to me, the biggest thing about being a mentor is just caring about the people you're working with and wanting to see them do well and wanting to see them achieve what their goals.
Yeah, I would say for me, probably one of my most meaningful mentors was in law school. It was a professor there. I never took a class with her. I just happened to meet her and talk to her one day, and she ended up being the negotiation kind of faculty lead. Ended up joining the negotiation team. Never knew that was a thing. And she just became the person I could talk to. I knew where she lived. She would invite me to her house, and she was just a sounding board. I chose a very different pathway in law, but she was someone who I just connected with. I think finding someone that you can talk to is a great thing. I would also say, along my career, I think it helps if you're an outgoing. I go a little stir crazy if I'm alone, and so I naturally talk to other people, even when I was kind of a loner at my court system job. I was lucky that I was working in an office with a lot of people. There were judges across the street who I knew when I was a law clerk. I was the weird law clerk who was bouncing to all the different judicial chambers. Got to know a lot of judges through that. One of them found out I played tennis. I played tennis with a judge, and I think find the people that you connect with on a natural basis, that you can be open and honest about what you want. And then they can help connect you to people in that field. But I would say first try to find someone who just you on a personal level like, and who you look up to, and think is a good person. Yeah, I think find people who are good people who care about you.
With study law justice, we're looking out, we have a Know Your Rights thing on, then please feel free to join us, you guys are free, we'll be happy there. I love this is awesome, this is very informative, thank you.
Thanks for
Thank you so
coming.
much.
Yeah, I would say in law school, notwithstanding the friendship with the other older student, actually the person who was closest in age to me in my first year of law school was my youngest professor. And we'd actually go to the same undergrad school and miss each other by a year. So that was actually, and I got to be friends with her husband as well. So being a later in life law student, actually, I befriended one of my professors and her husband, which gave me a lot of insight into things you can do with a legal degree, which actually then gets me into a mentor I had here. Was I took 3 years off from practicing law to work at the United Way of Anchorage, whose president at the time was a non-practicing former attorney. And when she recruited me, that was one of the things she kind of pitched to me was like, you don't want to practice the law, you want to make a difference in the community. And she, that's one thing you'll also hear quite a bit is that getting a law degree doesn't mean you need to pursue a career in the law as a lawyer. You will learn all kinds of skills that are transferable to many different occupations. So she had decided after being a very successful attorney that she wanted to pivot into being a nonprofit leader. And she was amazing at it. And I think among the things I learned from her was from her management style was to hire well and carefully, and then give people the room to do the work. And so that created a lot of trust and a sense of owning the responsibilities I've been given, and it really felt empowering. And I think that's something I try to keep in mind myself.
I've had so many mentors. I think Karen Nyquist is probably the biggest one. She's my partner now. I work for her, the next law group. I've worked for her for 10 years. But Deb Harriman was my advisor here, and she's the one that said, you can go to law school, when I'm crying in her office about how I'm not going to be able to go to law school. Ryan Fortson was really you know, a good mentor to me in family law, in, you know, just the legal, navigating the legal community. He invited me back to teach a couple classes, although I think UA needed adjunct professors just as much as he was like, you would be good at teaching family law, but, I really wanna, I do family law and I'm really into alternative dispute resolution. And so for my externship, I reached out to a mediator who's a retired judge who I really admired. And I just sent her an email and said, hey, retired Judge Stephanie Joanides, can I do my externship with you? And she said, heck yes, you can. And now she's a really good friend and mentor. I called her crying the other day after hearing where I had to go and have an in-chamber conference with the judge and just like telling her about my day and, you know, what it's like. So I think the best thing about seeking mentorship is like, look at the people around you. Who are you, who do you admire? Who are you interested in learning from? Reach out to them. We're a small legal community and lawyers love talking about themselves. Love it. So anytime you ever want to know more, just send an email and say like, hey, I really admire this work that you do. Would you mind having lunch with me and just like having a conversation? I did that in school with Lauren Hildebrand, who's now a master. I reached out to him. He was heading the mediation program at the court system. And I said, hey, I'm really interested in this. Will you have a coffee with me? And he said, yeah, I'd love to have coffee with you. And he just, you know, I mean, I think anyone that I've met in the community would be willing to learn. I think we all care about the next generation and making sure that this is a sustainable access to justice for this community. You know, Alaska has very niche needs as far as access to justice goes, because we are not all on the road system and every community is very different. I mean, the needs, being familiar with Alaska is really important in practicing law, but it's also like, are you familiar with what it's like to live in King Salmon or Naknek versus what it's like to live in Fairbanks or on the, you know, on the peninsula? And so, yeah, it's just reaching out. What are your interests? Find someone that's in your community that you admire and want to talk to, and just don't be afraid to reach out.
I'm gonna add too, I didn't know as many people in the community as Jessica did, so I would have known who to reach out to. If you are one of those people that you don't know who to reach out to me.
Yeah.
And I will be your mentor, like,
Danielle knows
maybe
that.
I'll be your mentor, but I will find someone who is in your practice area, who, like, I will try to find some connection.
We can ask us too.
Yeah, yes.
I started with professors and advisors. That's a good place to start.
Yeah, and then I'll also say that we at the Alaska Bar, we are in the process of creating a mentorship program to try to first we're formalizing one for our attorney members ourselves, but then we're hoping to expand it to those who want to be attorneys. And so that's something that should be coming, but until a formal one is set up, you can always reach out.
We bring into smaller groups.